Joining us now is Chris Sarandon. Welcome to the show, Chris. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great, Donna. Thank you very much.
Now, do you live in the New York area now? Where are you today?
I live in suburban Connecticut, about an hour and 10, 15 minutes from the city.
The pretty part of Connecticut, where they have beautiful
Yes,
trees.
right. Exactly. We love it up here.
I live in Huntington, which is just probably like kind of diagonal from you, and also beautiful trees. They call Huntington the Little Apple because it's a lot like New York
Oh,
City in terms of like the old brownstones and just the character of the
right,
streets. So
right.
it's quaint. It's like it's almost like a blink of New York City, Chris. It's like a tiny. When they talk tiny apple, they
Right.
little apple, they might make a cherry. It should be like a cherry pit. Is basically what
Ah,
Huntington is.
I see.
But I do love
Got
it
it.
here. But I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and you're from West Virginia.
Yes,
So
yes.
how did your early days, Chris, growing up in a place that had such a strong work ethic like West Virginia, prepare you for your acting career in all these years?
Well, I think not only the work ethic of the people in West Virginia, all of whom are obviously very hardworking people. It's a state that had depended for any number of years on mining, coal mining. That has diminished to a great extent. But the people are, hardworking. They consider themselves mountaineers. Uh, and then the dual side of that is that I grew up in an immigrant first generation Greek family. So the work ethic was very strong there as well. My dad started working when he was a very young boy in his father's coffee shop, the family business, by the way. And that work ethic sort of has carried me on. I started working my dad's restaurant when I was 9 years old and did until I went away to college when I was 18. Uh, Resolved, by the way, never to go into the restaurant business.
And here
It's a
we
tough,
are.
tough, tough business. Yeah.
But here you are full circle in a way, because
Yeah,
the
exactly.
the title of your show is
Cooking by heart. That's right. My
ta-da.
podcast.
So it all
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
started. I think there's so much about food and love, that helps sustain us, especially in our childhood and those teen years and the holidays. And
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thrust of the show. Essentially, was that my during the pandemic, my brother-in-law, who's a major podcast freak, had talked to me, and he said, what are you doing during the pandemic? Nobody was working, and I said nothing. I'm gardening. I'm an inveterate gardener. I love to garden, and he said, why don't you do a podcast? And I said, oh gosh, Todd, I oh, what am I going to do a podcast about? And he said, come on, you're Greek. Your father owned a restaurant. You cook for us constantly whenever we see you. Your life is very much about food. Do a food podcast. And I was reluctant at first because all the shows I listened to, I didn't have a particular personal connection to until I started thinking, of course, about my history, working in my dad's restaurant, my mom cooking at home. She always enlisted me to help so that she kind of trained me in the Greek side, and then in the restaurant when I was working, I was trained in the all American side, if you will. And it seemed a natural fit to be talking to friends, guests, people in show business. I talked to a federal judge. I'm going to talk to my primary care physician, who's a nutritionist as well, about the food we grew up with, because those memories are so indelible. And what's stronger than childhood memory?
well, and for me, one of my teenage memories, Chris, and I don't think I've ever mentioned this on any of my shows over the last 15 years I've had the show, is that I worked at a fast food place at a mall called
Ah,
It's Greek to Me. And so as the gyros was spinning around, I was slicing it
I
down.
love it.
So,
I love it.
that's about as close as I could get. But I have been to Greece. It's a beautiful country. The food is so
Oh,
incredibly delicious. And you have a lot of your friends that you've acted with over the years as your guest, like some
yeah,
really
correct.
big, super big names. So that must be exciting for you too, to kind of work with them and collaborate with them, but in this new kind of twist way.
Yes, exactly, exactly. We don't talk about, well, we do talk about our careers because we always get around to it. Um, I've talked to Carrie Elwes. I've talked to any number of people that I've worked with. I did a wonderful movie, vampire movie, a number of years ago called Fright Night. I interviewed the entire cast of Fright Night. I also talked to friends of mine who are in other related fields. Michael Patrick King, who's the one of the creator showrunners of Sex and the City, and it's the sequel that's now running on HBO Max. Adriana Trajani, who's a writer. Kathy Mattea, who's a Grammy-winning country music singer, who's from West Virginia. So I try to sort of pull the strands of my life together, both professionally and privately. I interviewed my kids. I did a great podcast with my three grown children, one of whom, my son, is a trained chef. Both my daughters are great cooks. They talked about growing up around food around my house. So it's been very educational, edifying, and also revelatory in a lot of ways because the stories that come out are they're just extraordinary.
Now, your children, were they fans of Princess Bride? I mean, we actually had a friend of mine had a license plate. Her name's Andrea that said Buttercup. Okay, so they're so Prince Humperdinck. Princess Bride is also when you're talking about like connections and things like that. What did your kids think about some of the projects that you've been in? Whether it's like, oh my gosh, you also did Jack Skeleton in Nightmare Before Christmas. Like you've done a ton of cool things. What are their thoughts on your career for that way?
Well, I don't know about other people who are in my business as children and how they react. I have a feeling they're probably the same. And that is
Okay.
that their experience when they were growing up was whenever they came to a movie set, it was boring. Basically, they did a lot of sitting around with dad in his dressing room. When he was working, when I was working, they didn't see me for a while. The last thing they wanted to do was hang around a movie set. So while they're obviously they're proud of their dad and his accomplishments, speaking of myself in the third person right now, uh, they at the same time have no illusions about what being in show business is like. In fact, I tell a story about one of my daughters when she was about, I think, 5 or 6 years old, and she was with a friend, and they were sitting in an ice cream parlor, or pizza parlor, or something, with the friend's mom, and the mom was kind of talking to the girls about what was going on in the family, and you know what your daddies do, don't you? And her own daughter said, "Yes, daddy makes wires in houses." And she turned to my daughter Alexis and said, "You know what your dad does, don't you?" And my daughter said, "Yeah, he looks for work."
Well,
Well, that's the reality of their lives with me in show business, which was most
well,
of the time I was on the phone, looking for
getting
the
that
next
next
job.
thing. Well, you started
Yeah,
out really super strong. You won. You were nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Dog Day Afternoon, right? And that was like in the mid
right, right.
'70s, right? And then what I like
Hmm.
about your career, Chris, is that it's almost like a tapestry, if you will, of like all these golden threads. So you've done so many things, like your regional theater that you did, and you know,
Right.
it's not you've been consistently working and you've mixed it all up, kind of like a perfect recipe, if you will, a little of this, a little
Well,
of that, a pinch of this, right?
well, I love that metaphor. Thank you. I'm going to use that, by the way. I'm going to steal it from you.
Okay.
Yeah, when I started out in college toward the end of my undergrad, and then during graduate school, sort of immersing myself in theater. And so from the very beginning, I looked at being an actor as I wanted to be on stage. If movies happened, if television happened, great, but that I wanted to have a career. I didn't necessarily want to just be, or I didn't want to, I wasn't looking to be famous, first of all. I was looking to have a career doing something that I love to do. And
Mm,
it's sort of, led me that
you're
way.
right. Funny little kickback here, because as I'm talking to you, every year since I was 10 years old, my mom has an annual Christmas cookie exchange, Chris, and I've carried on that
Hmm.
tradition long after her passing, and everybody brings it
Yes.
has to be homemade cookies. But then I have these theme rooms here at my television studio when people walk in, and one of the themes this year was Nightmare Before Christmas. So I'm
Oh,
laughing
how
at you
great.
because as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, I was like, oh yeah, we had like Jack in this room. I'll have to send you a picture of that room. Uh,
Oh, I'd
one
love
of
to see
them,
it.
one of them was a Home Alone room. One of them was classic, the old like, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And then the other one was completely like a Christmas Carol. And then the whole place is all decked out. But it's always the first Sunday of December. Going back to our cooking things and those recipes, what's one or two recipes that you just feel like are a staple at every holiday for you? Like it's not a holiday unless you have that item.
Well, golly. I'll give you a very specific example because we have delayed, by the way, because our various children have been away, my kids, out of town. But we do Greek Easter, where we all gather together every year on Greek Easter, which is sometimes the same as Western Easter, Protestant, Roman Catholic Easter, and sometimes it's slightly different. Uh, and we're going to get together this coming weekend. And the staple dishes are very Greek. Spanakopita, which is a spinach and cheese pie with the phyllo dough and the feta cheese and spinach filling. We do a roast lamb, of course. What's more Greek than roast lamb? We do tzatziki. We do, I make a Easter bread, something called sureki, I think it's called. Anyway, if there
Is
are any
that
Greeks watching or listening,
Yeah. Is
pardon?
that the one that has the eggs in it? Is that like a braid that has
Yes.
eggs in it?
Yeah. It
Okay.
looks like a challah. It looks like a
Right.
challah bread, but it's slightly sweet.
So Chris, do you have pictures of that lamb? That sounds really great.
Yes, in fact, I think one's popping up on the screen right now.
There we go.
Uh,
It looks
great, great. It's
it looks
a
great.
roast,
So you're going to
right?
be there. Okay,
Roast.
so tell me what you put on your lamb.
Actually, it's a very simple recipe because it's the way my mom cooked it. Of course, that's the part of keeping the tradition going, which is to uh, bathe the lamb in a marinade of olive oil, oregano, um, whatever other herbs or condiments that you prefer, but those are the ones that we use. And then I lace it, literally, I prick holes in the lamb and take slivers of garlic and push the slivers of garlic down in the lamb, and I lace it all over, and then we roast it.
Sounds really good. I don't live too far from you, so I could always like ring the doorbell after your Greek Easter, that your celebration. I'll just take the leftovers. But I know in your household, there's probably no leftovers. It's probably, everybody probably just really enjoys the feast. So we were
Well,
also.
we have
Go ahead.
nine grandchildren among our shared four children, Joanna, my wife, and I. So we are 16, 17 people usually, and sometimes we have guests. At Thanksgiving, by the way, you were talking about holidays, which of course
Yes.
we do a very traditional Thanksgiving with two turkeys, and we have something like 25, 30 people. So
Wow.
we love it. And everybody cooks. Everybody pitches in.
And I think that's the best part. Like you got somebody peeling the potatoes, and so with
Yep.
your guests, when we're going back to Cooking with Heart, Chris, how you've done several
Cooking
several
by
oh Cooking by Heart,
cooking by
sorry,
heart.
Cooking
Yeah.
by Heart, correct. Um, when you're doing Cooking by Heart, you already have several. How many have you completed? About 12 or 13 now? How many
I think
episodes?
about 13 so far. Yeah, 13, 14, maybe a couple of more. We do them every other week.
Now tonight you have a special guest that's going to be, you know, virtually being with you. And who's that guest? Who's one of your most recent guests?
The most recent guest is Mario Cantone. Mario, I'm sure everybody knows Mario from Sex and the City. He's done a number of Broadway appearances. He's also a frequent guest or host on any number of television shows. The View, he's been on gazillion times. He's appeared on all the late night shows. Mario's a very funny raconteur, wonderful impressionist. And Mario grew up in a big Greek family. I'm sorry, big Italian family. Here I am transferring people into my own ethnic group. He grew up in a big Italian American family. I think one of five kids, a boisterous, very, very loud, wonderful sort of rollicking family. And we're going to talk about that tonight, or today rather, when we do our podcast. We actually do the podcast today, but it's going to be broadcast next Tuesday. It'll be on my website, chrissarandon.com, and we will be showing it. I'm just looking at the date because I don't have it in front. The 25th of April.
Okay, so it'll be coming right around the
where
bend.
Mario will be.
Do
Exactly,
you,
exactly. And
are,
we record them both video and audio, so they're on YouTube as well as all the podcast platforms.
now, this is a funny question because it just came to me. Of all the craft service tables, Chris, that you've had at all the
Hmm.
various different sets, is there one that's
Yep.
where you it sticks out to you as being like particularly great?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I remember this immediately when you said that. This one came up. I
Okay.
made a movie a number of years ago in Spain with Sean Connery and oh God, the cast: Marty Balsam and Jack Weston and Brooke Adams, a wonderful Denham Elliott. A movie called Cuba, directed by Richard Lester, who directed the Beatles movies, Hard Day's Night and Help, as well as any number of other Three Musketeers, what have you. And we were staying in a hotel there, all of us in the same location in a town called Jerez de la Frontera, which is a horse town and also a sherry, where they make sherry. And the caterer for the production was a Spanish caterer, and you would go in and sit down for lunch. And instead of going up to a food truck or going to a cafeteria or having a pre-prepared lunch for you, as most caterers do, we sat down, waiters came up, took our order. The general orders were fresh fish that was shipped in from Algeciras, which is on the Mediterranean coast. I mean, it was like a gourmet meal every day, extraordinary, with wine, because they drink wine during the day. It was amazing, amazing.
It sounds just like it makes you want to say opa, but in Spain,
Yeah.
I guess it would be bellissima, bellissimo. It
Yes.
sounds like
Right.
a
Well,
really
that's
beautiful
Italian. Right.
experience. Oh, so one other thing too, talking about heart, I read somewhere that you also were the voice of like a very famous video game, like Kingdom Hearts or uh,
Well, that's Jack Skellington is in Kingdom Hearts. Yeah.
okay, so you voiced that
Jack.
over too.
Yeah, I do all the Jack voices. I do it at the Haunted Mansion. Whatever the ride is at Disneyland and Disney World. That's my voice as Jack. I do ringtones. You name it, I do it.
You've reached Drake Media Studios, and this is Chris Sarandon.
Right.
Chris,
Right.
you are delightful. I'm so happy we got to spend this time together. I could just talk to you for hours and hours. Is there anything in particular that we didn't cover that is on your heart that you want to talk about? Is there like a favorite charity or something, or a shout out or a
Well,
wave you want to give to anybody?
Well, an additional shout out I'll make, although the tickets are going really fast, we're almost sold out. I'm doing an interview, a live podcast, and she's going to do a book signing with Lydia Bastianich, who's the
Wow.
great Italian chef, restaurateur, one of the founders of Italy in major cities all over the country. She has any number of restaurants all over the country. She's a cookbook author, a PBS contributor, her cooking show. She's a remarkable woman. She's joining us at the Sacred Heart University Community Theater in Fairfield, Connecticut, right across Long Island Sound from you guys. And she's going to be there on June the 4th. A 3:00 matinee, and afterwards, I think it's 3:00. Yeah. At any rate, when you go on the Sacred Heart University Community Theater site, you'll find the ticket availability. But better act fast because they're going.
I got a chance to recently meet her at the expo at the Javits Center, and she told me about her grandmother and how her grandmother taught her how to like grow food, and how important ingredients are, and potatoes, and just, you're right. Everybody's in for an absolute treat. That's a double feature right there, Chris. You and Lydia
Right. Well, the double feature will be, if people are interested in listening. I previously did a sold out performance at the same theater with Jacques Pepin, the great French chef, American food sort of influencer for the last 50 years. And Jacques is on the podcast. So it's a wonderful group of people that I have. And also, by the way, all my guests share a recipe. So there are recipes on the website as well.
I listened to Hal Linden's earlier too. So yes, you're right. My audience
Yeah.
is in for a definite treat. So I'm inviting my entire audience to now follow Chris Sarandon, be fans of him if you're not already. And thank you, truly, Chris. It was just a real joy
Thank you.
today. So, and I'm excited. I want
Thank
to
you,
go home
Donna.
and cook. I don't know what I'm going to go cook,
Yeah.
but I'll cook something.
Whatever it is, cook
Whatever
it
it is.
yourself. Exactly.
There you will.
Okay.
And I'll put a
Bye-bye.
lot of heart into it. Be well. Bye, my friend.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.